What's going on? This is Jonathan Salmon back with another breakdown. This time I'm going to be reviewing the recent fight between Donald "Cowboy" Cerrone and Justin Gaethje. Now, it was a pretty good fight, I would say. I think both guys really did their thing. They really tried to implement the game plan pretty well. I think Justin Gaethje surprised me He was pretty effective with his approach. After his last loss to Dustin Poirier, since then he's been fighting way smarter. He hasn't really just been bullying forward like he usually did in the past. He's been a little bit more strategic with how, he strikes. He still has that kind of brawling style, but you'd say he's like a technical brawler at this point. Cerrone did what he usually does, but I think he kind of came up short with a lot of his blitzes, and I think that's what ended up really being his downfall. He used the jab pretty well, and he tried to counter when Justin Gaethje threw leg kicks and everything like that. So he did his best, and just the result wasn't all that favorable for him. Justin Gaethje had a pretty good game plan, and you could see it with every exchange that he really was training and really broke down Cowboys' game. So, honestly, I think after this fight, after this victory for Gaethje, he really showcased that he has what it takes to fight against Khabib or Tony Ferguson or anyone at the top of the division. I think he took the lessons from his losses, and kind of really just buckled down and really think about what he does well and how to kind of avoid damage. Before he didn't really care about taking damage, and he would just wade forward, take what you threw at him, and just to give you one. But now, in this fight especially, you really saw that an intelligent approach to fighting Cowboy. So it really showed that he has grown as a striker, grown as a fighter, and really there's this kind of maturity to his game now, not just willing to take all this damage and more willing to just inflict damage and stay away from his opponent's strikes. So I was pretty impressed with this performance by Gaethje. So as for the fight itself, I really I tried my best to do a breakdown. The UFC is on crackdown mode. I know a lot of people are looking for video, for the video portion of this. They're looking for that video breakdown and everything, but not so easy when the UFC's cracking down on video. So I did my best and tried to do some screenshots and everything like that. So anyone watching the video portion, hopefully you get some knowledge and some good tips out of this breakdown. But as for the fight itself, the things that I noticed, so with Justin Gaethje's approach, everyone knows he loves to throw leg kicks and everything like that. And, in this fight, you really saw him using the leg kick and using it with this kind of intelligence that we hadn't seen really before. And we also saw Cerrone utilizing his jab very, very well. Particularly in the beginning of the fight, he used his jab well and kind of kept Gaethje at bay from just throwing any kind of offense. When Gaethje threw a leg kick, we did see Cerrone fire back with either a cross or a jab or hit him with something back. He didn't just give up leg kicks for free. He would come back with a 1-2 pretty sharp. But the interesting part about that is that he would, every time that he would come forward with his jab cross or a blitz, Gaethje was just ready to counter with an overhand right. Cerrone would throw his right hand and Gaethje would come back over with his overhand right. And he landed a few times in the beginning of the round, towards around the 3-minute mark or so. He was landing that overhand right after Cerrone would come forward with a blitz or with a jab cross. He was really diligent about that. So, every time that Cerrone threw his jab, landed his jab, Gaethje would counter with either a left hook or counter with a left hook right hand or overhand right, directly afterwards. It was almost like he was timing that jab cross from Cerrone. He also did a great job, Gaethje, in feinting and really getting Cowboy out of position. There was one time that he feinted. Cowboy lifted his leg to check, the incoming leg kick or leg kick that he thought was coming his way. And when it didn't come, he put his foot back down to, and thought he was safe. And that's when Gaethje actually threw the leg kick and landed it. So he's very, very effective with that. As soon as Cerrone would throw his jab or even feint with the jab, I think if he did have a few feints. Cerrone has this kind of pumping back and forward kind of style with his lead hand before he actually throws his jab. So that would kind of get people, you'll catch people sleeping with that and actually be able to land his jab. But, Gaethje was prepared for every time that Cerrone threw a jab or threw a jab cross, particularly a jab cross. I saw him trying to counter off the cross probably even more than the jab. I felt like he used Cerrone's jab to kind of gauge distance, and when he felt Cerrone was going to come with his crossover, right behind his jab, he would throw the counter overhand right after that. So it was almost like Gaethje used Cerrone's jab against him. When Cerrone used his jab, he realized, all right, I'm in his space, and when he comes with that cross, I'm just going to duck my head to the left side and cover my overhand right. And that was really, really successful for him. And those were the kind of things, those little small nuances in the striking that we don't often think about. Gaethje was very, very prepared for that. A lot of times, a lot of coaches, myself included, would tell our fighters that, the jab is the most important punch in boxing or in striking. Jabs are super important. They gauge distance. They set up additional offense, all that. But, if you have a jab and a lazy jab, and I'm not saying Cerrone has a lazy jab. He has a pretty good jab. But whether you have a lazy jab or a pretty good jab, if you start building a predictable pattern, you jab once, you jab twice, and once it's successful, you throw your right hand. Those kind of things, they're picked up on. They're really small, subtle things that are picked up on by an opponent, and eventually, if they can time you, then you're in deep trouble. So I think that's what we kind of saw in this fight. Gaethje realizing that Cerrone wouldn't really throw his right hand until his left jab was kind of successful, or at least, the body language. Gaethje would read the body language, waiting for the cross to come out, and that's when he would counter. But it was also the blitzes. Cerrone, he likes to blitz a lot with his strikes, which is something very common in karate. You would see a little bit more, but he likes to blitz forward with his strikes. I think that's come from training with the Brandon Gibson, who is a karate black belt, I believe, as well, and a boxer as well. He has boxing and karate in his background, and he trained Cerrone for a long time on the pads and everything at over in Coach Winklejohn and Greg Jackson and everything, that team over there. So, that blitzing style is something that we've come to see out of Cerrone, in his during his career. So it was very interesting. Not only did Gaethje just use the leg kick, the right leg kick and the overhand right to set up, each offense, because the startup from both looked very similar. There's also a point during the fight where he went southpaw. He actually went southpaw before he engaged Cerrone. And the interesting part about that was that when he went to southpaw, Cerrone thought a leg kick was coming, and he automatically brought his left leg up to check the kick, the incoming kick, and nothing came. It was just a stance switch, and Gaethje was able to get offense off just from switching stance, like right in the pocket. So it's very interesting. I see that being a tool that Gaethje could use in the future against other opponents, especially if they get used to his overhand right coming out. Just a simple stance switch could potentially catch people slipping a little bit, give them, that stance switch. If he moves his right leg forward to go into southpaw, it just looks like a leg kick is coming. So that in itself could get an opponent to freeze, and then he can actually start landing more offense after that. But again, Cerrone would blitz, and Gaethje would counter with the overhand right and left hook behind it occasionally as well. And that's that left hook actually was the beginning of the end. That he countered with I believe Cerrone blitzed in with a right cross and left hand right behind it, left straight, and Gaethje was off the center line and was able to land a left hook. It was a kind of a slapping left hook, after the right hand. And then after Cerrone came with his left straight, he was able to counter with the right overhand. And that's what really closed the show. And, I mean, you could tell this is when training, like you just see good training just over and over and over, just repetition. The jab cross, like countering over the top of the jab cross every single time, almost in this fight. You can see the repetition that was put into practice for Gaethje's camp. You really see that there was like kind of a diligent approach to this fight for Gaethje. So, what do I think about Justin Gaethje moving forward against Khabib, against Tony Ferguson? Let's think about Khabib for first. As far as Khabib is concerned, the interesting part is if someone can shut down his wrestling, that's when we'll see the absolute best or worst out of Khabib. If someone shuts down his wrestling, it becomes a very interesting fight from there. We get to see how does, Khabib is going to be relentless. He's going to keep shooting. But the interesting thing about Justin Gaethje is that he has a wrestling pedigree to kind of counter Khabib. And I think he has an understanding of, footwork. We even saw footwork in this fight where he would bounce back, forth, side to side, circle away. He wouldn't just stay in the pocket. He would use his footwork to either circle to his left and then eventually throw a right leg kick. He would use that to kind of set up his right leg kicks and everything like that. So we see there's a wherewithal for Justin Gaethje to use his footwork to get out of dangerous spaces. And really dealing with Khabib's wrestling is all about that footwork. Once you engage in the wrestling with Khabib, it's already kind of too late. You're already in the danger zone. You've already set yourself up to be in Khabib's world. So it's really important to use footwork, keeping distance, and obviously Khabib is very good at cutting off the cage and getting people to where he wants them to be against the fence. But we saw Gaethje really try and control center in the fight, and those are the kind of things that he'll need to do against Khabib to really offset the wrestling. Control center, and I think using those leg kicks will really beat up Khabib's front leg. And even if Khabib does go for a shot, Gaethje's wrestling is pretty good. He doesn't use it enough, obviously, but it's very, very, very high level wrestling. So I would expect to see either some scrambles or some pretty good wrestling exchanges. But ultimately, I think from what we saw from this fight, that Gaethje is really diligent about controlling the center of the cage. And when he's at center, he can really land his offense. And against Khabib, that is absolutely paramount. You got to be able to control distance and control the center. If you don't control the center, if you don't control the distance, if you get Khabib even touching you, it's probably going to be a long night for you. So he has that diligence to keep that going. As for a fight with Tony Ferguson, Tony Ferguson is such a wild man. That fight will just be pure insanity, I think. But I think as far as Tony's concerned, he does leave himself open for counters. He punches a lot with his chin high in the air, and against a guy like Gaethje, that's super dangerous. Especially in this fight, we saw that Gaethje, one, he has tremendous power in his hands, which we already knew, but two, he has a diligence to stick to a game plan, to read his opponent, to see them waiting forward, and he has the mentality that he will just stay in the pocket and brawl with you, so that he's not afraid of that. He'll utilize that to his benefit, stand his ground, and then try and land counters on Tony as he comes forward. So those are the interesting things from Justin Gaethje that I've been seeing in his last few fights. He has a much more diligent approach to his game planning and very, very disciplined. And if he remains like that against either Tony or Khabib, we could potentially see a future where Justin Gaethje is the champion. And that's not something that I really thought about, especially, we have quick memories, especially in MMA. You see a guy lose a couple of times, you're not going to write him off completely, but you do see that, particularly with Gaethje, he had a habit of just staying in the pocket and just wanting to be in these crazy wars. Now that we've seen a shift in his personality, now that we've seen that he's willing to take a different approach to his game planning, one, we see maturity, we see adaptation, we see a kid that is willing to not be stubborn and to really try and change his approach. And those are the kind of things you need if you want to be a champion in this sport. And this last win over Cerrone kind of showed that he has that wherewithal to know when to change his game up and to stick to a game plan and really fight smart, So if you guys like this breakdown, give me a like, a subscribe. You can hit that notification bell because I will be dropping more videos and more podcasts and content. And I will see you in the next one.